I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 71 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. Just grabbing my coffee. I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, PhD, EMDR consultant, and mom of 3 daughters. Didn't get an episode out last week. Lots of life stuff going on and, just didn't happen. But I try not to let that happen more than once every 6 to 8 weeks, I guess. But, that's life. And we just keep forging ahead and accept imperfection, as I'm always talking about. So anyway, episode 71. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to talk a little bit more clinical today, maybe theoretical, not like clinical skills based, but more just like clinical issues. I wanted to talk about setting loving boundaries in your intensives practice, both with yourself and with your clients. So boundaries for yourself and boundaries that you hold with clients. First, I'm going to give a little reminder definition of boundaries, a lovely one that I found on Reddit, of all places, a great resource. Anyone know how to cite Reddit and APA? Little academic joke there. I'm going to talk about why these boundaries are loving. I think it's important to think about loving boundaries as something that actually is safe and relationship building. They allow us to do our best work, and they allow our clients, many of whom never experienced relationships with safe and consistent boundaries. It can, like, holding boundaries helps them experience how safe boundaries are supportive of a relationship and a secure attachment. So let's forge ahead. So boundaries, right? That overused word we all love to throw around. People talk about, I feel like with that, what was his name? Jonah Hill guy. I don't know if you guys remember that whole Instagram controversy where his then girlfriend, I think, who was a professional surfer, posted, some images of her, surfing in a bikini. And I believe he got really angry about it and said some things about this goes against the boundaries that we have, that you're not supposed to post these pictures. Those are not boundaries, right? But everyone likes to, the word can be weaponized. So sometimes it can have kind of the flavor of, boundaries are when I tell you what to do so I can get what I want. That's not what we're talking about here. But it's really important as therapists to know how to articulate correctly and establish and hold boundaries in the truest sense of the word. Okay. So when I said I found this little definition on Reddit, it was on the codependency subreddit, and long-eared Luby, I think that was the person who posted it. So thank you. It's about 2 years ago, I think, I found this recently searching for it, but I think it was posted about 2 years ago. So here's what long-eared Luby on the codependency subreddit had to say about boundaries. A boundary is a rule that you create to help you regulate your behavior, okay? To help you feel safe and strong and protect yourself against people who may not have your best interests at heart. That doesn't mean they're bad, by the way, but most of us are the only ones who really have our best interests at heart. There are other people in our lives who may, but a lot of people are thinking about themselves for natural reasons. But in any case, but boundaries are not about what anyone else does. That's control, right? They're about rules we have for our own behavior to keep us safe and protected. So, for example, please don't call me is not a boundary. It's a request, and it could be an attempt at control, right? Like if you have a parent with whom you have a difficult relationship, saying, please don't call me, you can't call me, is not, that's an attempt to control their behavior, right? You could say, I will not pick up the phone when you call. That's a boundary. That's you saying, this is what my behavior is going to be to keep myself safe, right? Its maintenance and enforcement is only concerns you, and you're the only one doing the maintaining and enforcing. Other people's behavior is not regulated. You're in control of what you allow. So I think this makes this really clear, right? Boundaries are about rules for ourselves that keep us safe. It's not about controlling the behaviors of others. So why does that matter in an EMDR intensives practice? Well, I want to look at both the boundaries that we should be holding for ourselves in our practices and the boundaries that we hold for clients, and why this matters as therapists and how that looks in an intensive. So, what are some examples of boundaries that we create in our practices? I think there's a variety of categories of boundaries. One of them is fees, right? Setting a fee that you feel good about, that pays you what you need to be paid, that allows you to be the therapist that you want to be, that keeps you from being burned out, that allows you to, pay your bills, feel financially at ease, comfortable. That's a boundary that you're setting and you're holding. You need to be making the money you need to make to show up in the way that you want to with your clients, and to keep yourself from being distracted by worrying about, do I have enough money to pay my rent on this office? Is my mortgage payment going to be covered this month? Like, those things distract us from our work. And so having a fee that for our intensive, or just for our practice in general, that allows us to be present and be the best clinician we can be, is a boundary we hold for ourselves, right? And we need to hold that boundary with clients, right? Things, we are not going to be regulated if we let clients kind of manipulate fees. And I don't mean manipulate in like they're being manipulative. I mean like change. If we let clients say like, well, I don't really know about that. How about this? And then you have one client paying $5,000 for an intensive, and then you've let someone else pay $2,000 for an intensive. How are you going to feel towards the $5,000 person versus the $2,000 person? Are you making decisions that actually feel ethical and aligned, or are you kind of making them in the moment because you feel pressure? So consistency around fees is a very healthy boundary to hold, and it allows you to do your best work, which is therefore keeping the client safe, right? So that's one kind of boundary. And it's a hard one to hold. A lot of these are hard to hold. But when we do hold them, our practice feels so much better to us and therefore to our clients. Scheduling, right? You decide what are your work hours and what days you work, how many weeks you work, whatever that is, and you stick to it. And you say that, you communicate that boundary, like, my work days are Monday through Thursday, and I do intensives between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. If that's your boundary and you say that, moving that all around is just going to open up the opportunity for continued like massaging of that, and it's going to start feeling icky. If that's what you really need, and you've had a honest conversation with yourself about what your needs are around your schedule, and you communicate that, and then you don't stick to it, that's not good. Not like, good things do not come of that. And that's certainly something that we work on in my program and in my coaching, is like, how do you come up with the schedule that you really need to have in your practice, and how do you communicate that to clients in a way that makes you feel good, and that where you can feel grounded and solid in saying that, because that is going to create the best possible therapeutic relationship. And something else about scheduling I would say too is like, staying consistent in terms of like when you start a session and when you end it. Not changing, like if you have a certain intensive plan scheduled, you don't like go back and forth about changing it a bunch of times, that you have a plan and you stick to it. It's easier on you and easier on them if there's consistency there. Um, I would say like trying to cancel like as infrequently as possible. I mean, I know that's like not easy because things come up, but like the more consistent we can be about that, the more that clients will take us seriously and stay consistent about it. And the more that they'll feel like they're important, right? People don't want to be like, oh, sorry, this thing came up. Can we just move tomorrow, 3 hours later? Da, da, da. Like, first of all, we have to respect people's time, and not everybody has the time and the bandwidth to change that much. And it doesn't really look super professional. So I think the boundary for that is on both sides, right? We're responsible for sticking to the schedule. And then that, makes it easier for us to hold the clients to the same standard. Something else that I think is really important is about boundaries is contact between sessions, right? What is your policy around how clients can contact you between sessions? And this looks different for an intensive, right? I think that when you're only working with clients in an intensive format, you could have a policy, could be, send me a text or an email if you're feeling really dysregulated so I can remind you of a couple of things between now and our next session. Or it could be that you say that texting and is for scheduling issues only, or you could say, if you want to talk to me, but if you want to like get some stuff off your chest between sessions, like it's totally fine to email me. I can't promise that I'll give you a lengthy response. I do promise I'll read it before I see you next. That's usually my what I say. And I always, and then phone calls, like I always say, like you know, I need one business day to respond to a call. So you like within, so please do not expect a response from me that's like immediate, right? That's an emergency. If you need me to know something immediately, you text me. And that really should only be for scheduling issues because I'm not an on call emergency therapist, right? I think with emails, there are some people who just find it like a helpful way to process to kind of dump some things in an email after a session. Great, fine. But I am not going to type back to you before I see you in person. I don't want things to be misinterpreted. I don't want to necessarily have to set up that standard where I'm expected to respond and this becomes a dynamic that we're engaging in. Sessions are time, like in session is a time to talk about that, not emailing back and forth. Emergencies. This kind of goes with the contact between sessions. I make it very clear to clients, I am not your on-call therapist. That's not the role that I play. If you need someone that you can consistently reach out to, and have a like that kind of a relationship with, that's not, you probably need a ongoing therapist. That's not me. Um, and you know, and making clients aware of like what are the emergency resources in your area. If they really do have an emergency, a psychiatric emergency, like certainly that's on my voicemail, that's on my email signature, all those things. But yeah, part of one of the reasons I am an intensive therapist is I don't have the bandwidth to manage emergencies for a variety of reasons, personal, time wise, kid stuff. Like I just don't have it, so I don't want to promise it. So that's a boundary that I hold, that I am not the therapist you contact if there's an emergency. I will help you to the best of my ability given the constraints of time and resources that I have. So I don't want people to be dependent on that. And that also goes along with sticking to being an intensive therapist, right? I have made the decision that except for a few ongoing clients that I see weekly that I've had for a long time, I am an intensive therapist. I do not take on clients who are not looking for intensives. I refer out if that's what comes up. And if I do an intensive with someone, I'm not going to then agree to see them for weekly therapy. Like, I don't want to be adding that to my schedule. I don't have that energy and time. And sometimes it can feel a little tempting because financially there's money there. But no, that's the boundary I've set for myself so that I know I can be the right kind of therapist, the therapist that I'm able to be right now, not, adding on more client. That's just going to undo, the reasons that I became an intensive therapist in the first place. So that's a boundary that I hold to, and making sure that the clients I work with intensively have other therapeutic support if they need it, right? And I also believe in terms of boundaries for myself is like every time I break or bend one of these boundaries for one person, I have to think about why am I doing it for this one person and not for everyone? There's some inequities that can happen. And certainly, there's like a difference between fair and equal. Certainly, everyone needs different things. But I have to be very, very careful about if I'm deciding to diverge from a boundary that I've set or a policy in my practice, I really, really better be clear about why I'm doing it. And like, if I'm going to do it with somebody else, if this is a change I'm going to make for everyone, this needs to be a thoughtful process and not a decision I just make because I'm feeling pressure either from the client or internally or whatever. Okay. So those are kind of like boundaries that I set up in terms of policies that do, of course, have, impact on the client, and there are things that I'm asking of them as well. But that's I would say mostly policies oriented. But then boundaries actually with like working with the clients in session, right? This is something I think about a lot because I work with a lot of clients with complex trauma, with dissociative disorders, who really, really, really have not ever been treated with love and kindness and respect in a relationship, who've never had their boundaries respected, who might not even know what healthy boundaries look like or why they are important. And boundary testing with all clients, but particularly with clients with disorganized traumatic attachment histories, they are going to test boundaries as a way to test the safety of the relationship. So being even more consistent is key. And these boundaries apply to all clients, but I certainly feel like it's something I've had to think about with a lot of intention because of the clients I work with. So the most crucial thing is you must state your boundaries clearly up front, and that includes your practice policies, right? Reiterate them frequently and gently. Be clear about why the boundaries exist, and be clear that they are boundaries you hold for all clients. I think this is super important. You don't want a client to feel like, oh my gosh, it's because I'm somehow a bad client or there's something wrong with me that this boundary exists. I make it very clear. This is what I tell every client. I have to work this way with everyone. It's not about you and me. It's about, creating a frame that creates the most safety for every client clinician relationship. I don't have different rules for different people. And I just think that continuing to be clear about that whenever there's a need, certainly at the very beginning of the relationship, and give lots of opportunities for questions. And whenever there's the need that arises, you reiterate it again. And it doesn't have to be something that causes hurt, and clients may feel hurt, and that's okay. And then you process that. But like, the more clear and consistent you are about what these boundaries are, and the more you uphold them with everyone, the easier it is to talk about them with clients, because you don't, this is what I do. This is just how it is. So, and right, like I've said, clients need to stay safe, and the relationship needs to feel safe. They have been in so many unsafe relationships. And for dissociative clients, that's how a lot of these dissociative parts have developed, is because of the fundamental lack of safety and often like extreme danger that they've experienced in relationship with others. And because of that, you are going to encounter parts as a client, as a therapist working with clients with a lot of trauma, that can be scary, parts that can be loud, parts that can be mean or threatening. Most very dissociative people have one or more angry parts, or even violent parts, sadistic parts, parts that reenact the trauma, and you need to know how to manage that. Okay, the rules I have, boundaries I have, is like, you are allowed to feel your feelings, and you should feel your feelings, but you cannot be abusive. Like screaming at me, calling me names, certainly throwing anything, breaking anything. Stuff happens, but we have to be able to have a conversation about it. We are both going to make mistakes, but we have to understand what the ground rules are. And we talk about how it's important for both the client and the therapist to feel safe in the relationship. It may mean that sometimes, and I've had to do this, I've had to develop a little bit more tolerance for some, like a person yelling in my office, because that's going to happen with clients who have these angry parts and stuff. But there has to be a way to manage that kind of brings the relationship back to a place of safety. Right. So parts can feel their feelings, but they cannot be abusive. And certainly not consistently over and over and over again. Um, and I'm speaking from experience with all of these, right? And you may have a part that's like, well, you just can't deal with the real, like, you can't really deal with this. This isn't really, you think you can handle me, you can't handle me. Let me show you. So there's that boundary testing too. And you can say, hey, I'm here to be present for every part of you that shows up, and I'm not going to tolerate being excessively mistreated. That's not okay. And that, no one else in their life who encountered that angry part would tolerate that, right? Like, so we have to be modeling what happens when you behave a certain way. And we are in a different kind of relationship, a therapeutic relationship. So we have to be able to, respond with love and compassion, but not, just put up with whatever, right? But that's the difference, right? In a therapeutic relationship, they're going to get that loving, compassionate response and attempt at repair that probably doesn't happen in other relationships. Other relationships like, well, screw you, I'm done with this. I'm not putting up with this. That's a big difference. Certainly, if these things happen over and over again and you don't feel safe, that's when you may have to figure out what to do with that person. But the more you are very, very clear about these boundaries, the more the fewer of these interactions you're going to have that are like, I mean, the parts are still going to come out, but you will have laid ground rules that you continue to refer back to. And that is, I swear, as hard as it feels to sort of push back against some of these parts, that is over time what they need to sort of create that sense of what a secure, healthy, boundaried, attached relationship looks like. Um, I think this is another example when it's really important with really dissociated parts to be super, super clear about time limits on sessions and to adhere to them. There's a lot of parts often that want to have airtime, and we get that. And we have to, and this is why intensives are so great. You have a lot of time. And you need to be, as the therapist, it's our responsibility to maintain the frame, and that includes time, right? So that's why when I say I have 30 minutes in an intensive day left and I've been working with anyone, but certainly with someone with a lot of dissociated parts, I'm going to name that. It's like, hey, I just wanted to point out that we have about a half an hour left. I would like to make sure we spend enough time like closing the session down, having some time to reflect on the day, before you leave for the day. I want to check in if there's anything, just really, and we need to be proactive. That's our responsibility to create that frame and to be consistent about it. To say, like, 30 minutes before the end of a day, we do start to close the session down so the person knows what to expect and they see that we are keeping our eye on the time. We are maintaining that structure. And again, like I talked about, about practice boundaries, contact between sessions. Okay. Again, when you have clients who have really disrupted, disorganized attachment history, you can get a lot of those texts like, I'm not okay. I'm feeling really suicidal. Da, 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 da. That's why I'm super, super, super clear from the beginning with clients about how I manage those situations and that they cannot rely on me to respond to those. Like I can barely respond to texts from like my mother, much less crisis texts from like I don't have the time or energy or bandwidth for it. And I'm honest with myself about that. And I'm honest with them. That's not the relationship I have. If they need that kind of therapeutic relationship, one, working in an intensive probably isn't the right thing. And two, they need to find someone who works that way. Maybe someone who has a little bit more of a DBT orientation, whatever. But that's not me. I can't do that. So I'm not going to do that. And I want to be very clear about that. And certainly, these are people that if I'm working intensively with them, they absolutely need to have a weekly therapist who they can talk through sort of crisis stuff with. And I need to be in touch with that therapist. I need to be communicating with them. There needs to be continuity of care. There needs to be, making sure that we're doing our part to keep this client safe. And the client needs to really, really understand that this is the structure that we're working within. Something else that's really important with working with people with dissociated parts is boundaries with child parts, right? Like I've certainly had child parts say things to me like, I wish you were my mom, which totally normal. And you validate that and you hear that, but you don't say anything that starts to blur the boundaries of your role, right? Like usually when I say that, I say, I know you wish you had a mom and you deserved this, who listened to you, who did not hurt you, whatever, and you see that maybe I could be like that. And that's so hard to notice that you didn't get that, you know, that's my role. It's not to be like, come here, let me soothe you, let me rub your hair, let me, tuck you in on the whatever. And I'm sounding a little bit maybe flippant, but I've heard about therapists doing that. Like reparenting. Yeah, reparenting is is something that therapy does, but not in the sense of like, you know, I'm gonna feed you baby food from a jar. I wish I were kidding, but I've heard about therapists who do things like that. You talk about blurry boundaries, right? That is not our job. And these child parts also need to know what relationship boundaries look like. And that's part of our job to teach them. And that holding boundaries does not mean we don't care. In fact, it's the opposite, right? And child clients can understand that. And it can feel really scary and overwhelming the first time a child part says, I keep saying child clients, I mean child parts. A child part says, I wish you were my mommy. Can you be my mommy? Can you be my mom? I'm like, your heart breaks when they say that. And that's not a wish that we can gratify in any way. They didn't get what they needed from their actual mom. I can't fix that. None of us can fix that. We don't have that kind of power. And that's another danger is like when we don't hold these kinds of boundaries, we can get this sense of like we're more, quote, powerful than we are. And that can do funny things to our ego. It's just not a good place to be. And boundaries will protect us from that too. Protect us, protect the clients. Another thing that's so important about boundary holding and with these is that you get the opportunity to process ruptures, right? When you can't fulfill the need that they say that they have, they could get angry with you. And that's okay. That's actually healthy. And it's a chance for them to work out what does it actually look like when I say how I feel about something and the person listens and we work through it. It's an incredibly healing moment, and boundaries make that possible. Um, so, yeah, and why is it hard for us to hold boundaries, right? We want to help. We care so much about our clients and we want to feel like we're doing something. And, when a client says, I just need a hug, and, everyone has different feelings about that. I hug some clients sometimes, but not very, very often, I will say. It's very, very unusual. But like, if it's not coming from them from a place that is necessarily productive, or if they say, can you be my mommy and can you hold me like a baby, like whatever it is, we can want to say yes to those things because we think we're filling a need. And that comes from our desire to help, right? Sometimes it can also come from our belief that we're not effective. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing anything. This isn't working. Oh, here's something I can do. I can, you know, let them stay longer for this session. I can, let them text me between sessions. And also the other thing is like, it's a slippery slope, right? We could say to them, okay, you're allowed to text me once between sessions. And then once turns into, someone sends you a text, you reply, and then they reply back to you. Is that one text? Is that several? Like it gets very, very slippery. But we can do it because it makes us feel more effective. And our jobs, our role, it can feel really hard to feel effective. And it's so nebulous. Progress can feel so nebulous. And so for us as therapists, it can feel really good to feel like we're doing something that is making a difference. But it can have the opposite effect. Certainly our own attachment histories play into this, right? If we have struggled with, emotionally immature parents or growing up in environments where boundaries weren't held or expressed clearly and held for us, it can be hard for us to know how to do it, which is why we all need ongoing therapy and support and consultation. A lot of us are people pleasers, right? And when someone says, I need to be able to talk to you during sessions, it can feel very hard to say no. But, and I will say over and over again, holding these boundaries is the number one thing that will help this relationship feel safe for you and for the client, will make it possible for you to continue doing this work. And it is one of the most healing things we can offer to clients, even though it's really hard. And it's very healing because it's really hard. We're both doing, the therapist and the client are doing very hard work when we're holding those boundaries. Therefore, it's good work. Hard work is often where the best stuff is happening, right? So, I know this is a sometimes controversial topic, a word that can just tossed around all the time in popular culture, and culture in the therapy world, on Instagram, on everyone's talking boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. So it is really, I think, useful at times to slow down as therapists and really think about what does this mean for us in our practice. And so I hope some of my thoughts provided you with some insights, and maybe you had some aha moments, and it made you think about, is this an area in which I need more support? Um, Certainly, a big part of the work I do with coaching clients is setting up really, really ironclad policies and structures so that these boundary issues are not something that they're, having to deal with over and over again. And, it can feel really hard the first or few times you set and hold a boundary, but it gets easier, especially because you see how effective it is for you and for the client. So I'd really love to hear feedback on this, if this is something others have thought about, or how does this come up for you in your practice? And certainly if you want support with any of this, I would love to be able to support you. A great way to always be in touch with me is to reach out to me on Instagram at future template parent. And I just hope these are conversations we all can continue to have, because I think they are so crucial to keep us well as therapists, and therefore to allow us to do our best work with clients. So thank you as always for listening, and thank you for your understanding about my not being able to get an episode out last week. I hope this one was, thought provoking and worth waiting for. And I will talk to you all soon. Fingers crossed. I think it will definitely be next week. I had my one little mishap this week, so back, full steam ahead. Take care, everyone, and talk soon.